We're ready to start. Where'd she go?
Ready, Diane?
Finally made it.
We're ready to start, man. Good evening. I have 7 o'clock, and we'll call the meeting to order. To start the meeting off with an announcement, I think many of you may have heard. Former Mayor Harold Smith passed away last Friday. So I'll read just a little bit out of his obituary. I'll try not to read the whole thing because it's a little long, but just so you know a little bit. So he was born in 1933 in El Dorado. And throughout his life, he viewed his purpose as one of service, serving his country during wartime, obtaining an education on GI Bill in order to serve others, and making one of the most important life decisions of buying a home, becoming an active member of his church. After retirement, Harold served several terms as mayor, leading the community of Bel Aire through difficult times with his fiscal knowledge and common sense. His passion for outdoors, he enjoyed spending time with his family, fishing, camping, canoeing, and exploring the canyons of lands of Utah. He is known for his kindness, his gentle manner, and his words of wisdom. He is preceded in death by his parents, his sister. Sisters Joan and Yvonne, survived by his wife Carolyn, and his sons Mike and Matt. So visitation will be tomorrow at from 4 to 7 p.m. at Downey Leahy East Mortuary. The graveside service will be held at 10:30 on Thursday, October 1st at Laredo Cemetery. So I don't know how far Laredo Cemetery is from here. But, anyway, so they did ask, in lieu of flowers, a memorial has been established with the Southern Utah Wilderness Alliance. And they have a website there if you'd like to have that information. So Harold was obviously part of the greatest generation, served World War II, which was one of the, a bad war, but a necessary war because of the threats to the world at the time. So we wish his soul rest in peace and pray for his family. At that, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Jeff Elshoff.
Here.
Dr. Joel Schroeder.
Here.
Mr. Justin Smith.
Here.
Mr. John Welch.
Present.
Ms. Diane Nguyen.
Here.
And you have a quorum, Mayor.
Thank you. Item 3 on the agenda is public hearing. For the purpose of public hearing is to give property owners and other interested parties opportunity to speak on proposed assessment spread. The city will be special assessing a number of properties for public infrastructure that was installed to service their lot. These improvements were petitioned by the developer to be assessed per parcel. Notices were sent out to landowners informing them of the special assessment amount, and this is the opportunity for anyone being assessed to identify possible miscalculations. So before we move forward to letting citizens come and speak, I believe there may be some written comments that our city clerk has received. So if you would please read those for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. The first comment is from Mr. Bob L. Jansen, 2J Enterprises, LLC. He is Rock Springs 2nd Special Assessments, Block 1, Lot 18, Block 1, Lot 19. His comments are governing body. Number 1, the company would like for these assessments to be waived this year due to the COVID-19 implications for the owners and tenants. Number 2, general property taxes for said properties are already in excess. Number 3, there is not a common area or sufficient walking paths to justify the amount being considered for special assessment tax. Regards, 2J Enterprises LLC, Bob L. Jansen, CR, Block 1, Lot 18, Block 1, Lot 19. And council members, I provided copies for you. The second comment we received was from Michael and Stephanie Jansen, and they said, "Hello, I received notice of the proposed assessment to our property at Block 1, Lot 1 in the Rock Springs Second Edition. We disagree with the proposed assessments and would like them to be waived. As property owners, we have suffered greatly this year due to the added financial burden associated with COVID-19. The added taxes would create an even bigger hardship for property owners. Additionally, the taxes are already considerably high, and there does not appear to be common improvements being made to justify the amount proposed for special tax. Please consider waiving these special assessment taxes." Signed, Jansen Holdings LLC, Michael and Stephanie Jansen. And those are all the comments we received in writing, Mayor.
Thank you. I do have a request to speak from Sandra Brewster. So Sandra, if you would approach the podium here and state your name and address, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. I do set, just so everybody knows, I do set a timer on my phone. If it goes off, it means your time's up. I will give you time to go on and finish your comments and concerns from there, okay?
Okay, my name is Sandra Brewster. I live at 5310 North Pebble Creek Street in Bel Aire. And I believe that the assessment for Block 1, Lot 12 is incorrect or unfair and unequal. All the other lots on Block 1 in the Rock Spring Edition is $4,713.85, which is 1/116th. My lot is assessed at 3/116th. I am the only lot developed on the east side of the street of my block, which is the southeast corner of that intersection of Pebble Creek Street and Pebble Creek Court. The lot on the northeast corner of Chris Street and Pebble Creek Street, which is right across the street from me, and that address is 5279, is assessed at 1/116th. That lot has a front sidewalk. I have no sidewalk on either street side of my property. If I did have a sidewalk, it would look like just like every other lot. I believe in paying my fair share, but this extra $10,000 does not seem fair. I believe that extra $10,000 should be assessed either to future property owners of the undeveloped lots that are south of me in Block 2 or 3, or maybe the city of Bel Aire should absorb this cost, which you could later obtain in future property taxes when the houses are developed in this edition. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other citizens that wanted to speak to the public hearing concerning these special assessments? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Mr. Mayor, I motion that we close the public hearing.
Second.
First and second, any discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith?
I am interested in just understanding that specific circumstance that was, brought up here as a public concern, and why that lot maybe has a disproportionate assessment. Is it appropriate to do that during the public hearing, or when we get to that agenda item?
City Attorney, do you have a call on that? What's the appropriate procedure?
I'm not seeing any special requirement, but I would defer to our bond counsel on what the scope of that public hearing, if it's restricted. If there's no special rule for it, then you are free to take information that would be helpful to you during that hearing and allow someone else to speak with the public as well.
Yeah, I would agree. The purpose of the public hearing is to take public comment. I guess if there's going to be further comment or discussion of that comment, maybe now's the time to do it. Subsequent action tonight is going to be consideration of an ordinance that will approve the assessment. So I think it would also be appropriate if there's going to be discussion of a change of a proposed assessment that you could take it up at that time as well.
Okay, so I guess we can determine what's our preference. When do we want to discuss it now? I'm
I think
personally-
now sounds great.
Okay.
I'm okay either way. I'm just interested in making sure it gets addressed and discussed, whether it be now or later. I want to make sure
Certainly.
that we don't miss the opportunity to discuss it if we close the public hearing.
Certainly.
Now it's fine with me,
Okay. Then let's go on and continue to discuss it. Mr.
Sure.
Henry.
I did talk to Sandra a little bit. She came in and we had a good discussion. First of all, on the 4,000 versus 14,000, earlier this year, the city approved a petition for Rock Springs Phase 7, I believe. And I went back and looked it up, and that's all the lots that are $4,000 will be assessed later on for that Phase 7 of the paving. So in fact, about everybody listed there is going to eventually be paying around $14,000. That's just off the top of my head, but usually in those lots over there, they're all relatively the same amount of spread special assessments. And I think Kevin Callan tried to mention that last meeting where sometimes it just works out better to have one set of houses in phase, say 6 versus phase 7, and then once everything's developed, everybody's going to end up paying around the same amount. Sandra's house is a little different because if you think of like a bottle, she's that house right on the top of the bottle, and a lot of her neighbors are assessed 4,000 when she's assessed the full 14, and that's mainly I think because her house is serviced by all 3 lanes. I'm not going to guess why the engineers did that. All this does is says exactly what the petition laid out at the beginning and made sure we spread it exactly how it's done. And I provided the original petition to Sandra to show her kind of how that mechanism works. And Kevin could talk a little easier on what this information and what this hearing is all about, is to make sure the city is following exactly what they said they were going to do, say, 3 years ago, and following through with this process that was petitioned to the city to build the road improvements and street and water and sewer. So if there's not any more questions, we can. That's just one thing I did. Went back and looked, and phase 7 would pick up the rest of those lots that are only assessed 4,000 to make everybody relatively the same.
So just so that I'm clear, the lots that are listed here, we'll be assessing them special taxes tonight, but then next year or at a future date, we will also be assessing those lots additional special taxes, and likely Sandra's lot won't be included in that list because
No, it's not.
It's been fully taxed
Specialized.
as of tonight.
Yep.
Okay, thank you for that.
Hey, Ted, I've got a
Sure.
couple questions just to follow up, for clarification.
Yep.
So these taxes that are assessed, the special assessments that pay for sidewalks and
Mm-hmm.
the roads and all the utilities and all that, and these payments or these taxes are not expected to be paid like in 1 year, right?
No, these will be spread over 20 years. However, if a homeowner wanted to prepay all of it, they could in the next 15 days. And what happens is we'll go out to bond, and once we bond, we'll get an interest rate, and that'll be put on top of it and then spread over 20 years of assessments. So it's not just, hey, give us $17,000 right now. That's not how it works. It'll show up on your tax statement, and for this issue, it'll be next December. So you'll have pretty much a full year before you even see these payments. This is just the notification part of before we go out to bond. So any of these new special assessments, I don't like using tax because People get them confused with property taxes, which only about 30% goes to the city of Bel Aire, and we provide services, police, all the other services we do with these. These are special assessments for your portion of that improvement. So the street right in front of your house, the water main in front of your house, the sewer main in front of your house. And when you talk sidewalks, Kevin might be able to get, the way petitions are saying, they're saying these number of lots are part of a benefit district. So it might necessarily not run right in front of your house, but it's in the benefit district. I believe that's how they classify that as far as sidewalks and certain things like that go. And all this is dictated by state law. So I just want to reinforce this. This is nothing just Bel Aire does or anything like that. It's clearly, it's what the tools that developers and really any group of neighbors can bind together and say, hey, we want this improvement done, and petition the city for that improvement to do. And this is the vehicle that the state of Kansas laid out for municipalities to follow.
Sir, if you want to come to the podium and identify yourself. And the same rule, give you 3 minutes. Please state your name and address.
Gonna need just a few minutes, so.
Okay.
Sean Snyder I live on Cypress over here, 5256, and we just moved in. The only question I had is, do we have an inkling of what the interest rate might be once we go to bond?
It's a good time to go to bond right now. Kevin, do you remember any of the last GO bonds that closed? I would say, 2% would be high. So it would be sub 2% right now, what we're seeing in the bond market, especially with these types of bonds, which are general obligation bonds that are guaranteed by the city. So investors are more than likely to buy these types of low-risk bonds. So, yep.
These are tax-free bonds, is that correct? Okay, thank you. Any other discussion?
I guess I do have another question.
Certainly.
For Mr. Henry again, and that is, so the two emails that the city received, the first one by Bob Jansen, let's see. Oh, the request is for the assessments to be waived due to COVID-19 implications. Have you had any follow-up with Mr. Jansen?
I talked to Mr. Jansen this afternoon. We had a good conversation, I'd like to say. He was more concerned, a few different areas that I addressed with him as far as what are these. He thought maybe it was extra taxes, I'm not sure. But I explained the process to him, went over everything, and I think we left pretty cordial. The problem with, if you were to waive a special assessment, the city would still have to pay it on the grounds of, because we have high property taxes. But if the city waived it and had to pay it, then I think that pressures the property taxes to go up. So I don't think, and like I said, these won't be assessed till December of 2021, so that will give a full year. Hopefully we have a better atmosphere of COVID in a year from now.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Henry. I also had another follow-up just on the other email from Michael and Stephanie Jansen of Jansen Holdings LLC. So the same request was made for a waiver. You contacted them as well?
He hasn't contacted our office. I think we got that one later on today. But I know I believe they're the father-son, so I think either if he contacts me, I'll be more than happy to talk to him, but it might have killed two birds with that one conversation.
Okay. So does it appear that we have, I guess, understanding between the city and these citizens then, or is there an outstanding?
I can only say I talked to Bob,
Okay.
but I know he mentioned his son a few times in the conversation, and it sounds like that might be the case, or the two letters, or the father-son. I had conversations with, I think, 11 residents throughout the last week or so, so I was there available if anybody had any further questions, and I don't see any here tonight. So I think we took care of as many that had concerns.
Okay, thank you.
It does seem that it's totally justifiable that people get a special assessment, at least feels like a special tax, right? And having a concern about that. So I'm not surprised that that is concerning. I think we're just worried about making sure we did everything right and that we haven't done anything inappropriate or unfair or something like that. But I certainly am not too surprised that when people got an extra special assessment, that was not happy news.
If you don't mind, just one more. I talked to a lot of individuals that are thinking about building a house, so it is out there. Hopefully people are contacting the city, but anytime I get a chance to talk to anybody, I'll say, if you're planning on building a house, come talk to the city. We have estimates that can guide you in this process so that when you build your house 2 years down the road, you don't get a letter, and that's the first time you've heard about it. So I would really like, Ty and I think about all the time is how do we reach people to say, hey, because we don't like this process either, because it feels like we're blindsiding people, but we're really just doing our job. So I always want to try to catch as many people as I can, but without standing on the corner of Rock and Central, it's really hard to catch everybody that's planning to build.
Yeah, Mr. Henry?
Yeah.
Is there anything that's required to be presented at closing when these people buy their houses that?
Go ahead.
Good question. I was going to address
Yeah,
that.
since
even
we've
if you
got
didn't have
people
the
that don't seem to know that it's going to happen, how can we make sure they know?
There, by law, when the benefit district is created, so 3 years ago when those original resolutions were adopted, those have to be recorded. So if there's any sort of title search done, that will show up, that this property is subject to special assessments, which ties into what Ted said. There are estimates in those resolutions, and you could try to do the math in your head, but you're better off calling the city and saying, hey, I see this lot is subject to this special assessment under this resolution. What do we think the estimate's going to be? And the city can provide an estimate on interest and that sort of thing. And then relatively recently, in the last 15 years, there's a state law that requires the seller to disclose special assessments. And again, they may not know the exact amount, but just disclose the existence and an estimate of what those would be. So I can always tell the city, you do everything you're required to do, and recording something with the Register of Deeds, and then there's going to be a title search probably when a sale transaction occurs. It's going to show up in the title work. It's a lot to ask probably the typical buyer to sort through all the title work and understand what's showing up, what's this resolution mean, but it's there, that's why it's there. And then again, in the last 10 or 15 years, there's the additional requirement that a seller is required to disclose it.
Okay, I say that because I think most people go into closing and they look at last year's taxes and last year's specials and think that's going to be it going forward.
Yeah, and sometimes it may be,
And the
you don't find out
taxes
what
on a new house are going to
Right.
skyrocket because they were taxed at agricultural land, and your specials are going to go up because you didn't have any roads there when you started.
Right. And again, that's the idea, record it with the Register of Deeds, so there's notice there, but, and again, what Ted mentioned and Ty, that's more informal than formal, just, hey, call us and we can help you through this, but I think they have been through this enough to know that people have questions, and maybe just seeing your title work and maybe some disclosure, the bare minimum to comply with the statute that is required of the seller isn't getting people where they maybe need to go or as far as they could go if they contact the city and get a little more information. But
Well, it's fantastic the city is willing to sit down and talk with them instead of just forcing it through.
So these special assessments are less than $1,000 a year when they're spread over the 20-year period. Is that a true statement?
it depends. I mean,
It depends on the special, but
Yeah.
what we're seeing,
Not the full length ones would be
Okay,
about
you have some others.
17,000, I think.
some are higher than this. Okay,
Yeah.
okay, all right.
But the interest component, I mean, it is a good time. There was a time where if somebody asks if it's 20-year bond, what do you think principal and interest would be? And I would say, we probably just need to double the principal. And that's going to be your interest cost over time. And that is not true these days. I mean, it's going to be a very small amount of interest if the market holds in the next 30 days or so. So that's the one bit of good news, even for property owners that aren't crazy about paying their special assessments.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions or comments, concerns?
Am I allowed to ask a question?
Certainly.
Am I allowed to ask
Yes,
a question?
please come to the
How-
podium,
how
please
do-
come to the podium because you need to be on the microphone. Okay? Thank you.
How did you make the determination if a lot was going to be 1/116th or 3/116th?
You want this one, or I did? What's that?
It's, like I gave this answer last time because it came up. That's engineering.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry.
Yes.
For your,
Yes.
for your future meetings where you want a forum to happen, the person you've invited to ask their questions should take a seat. And
Okay.
then
Okay.
Kevin should address the mayor.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, it is the engineering and the goal is to make sure similarly situated lots are treated in the same way. And when I say engineering, a lot of it has to do with making determinations about who's going to use this street improvement more or less, or have access to it, who's going to benefit from the sewer when we design it this way, even though this is phase 2, and that may not build out until phase 7. You'll see some of the sewer assessments arrive early. So it is strictly engineering based on the phased approach and how are things going to be constructed to serve a particular lot. Now, if you have a different fraction, if a lot has a different fraction, it's a determination that it benefits more or less. And so streets are an easy example. If your lot is on a cul-de-sac, only the lots on the cul-de-sac are going to benefit and get assessed for that. But if it's more of a through street improvement, there may be frontage on that street, and so that lot would benefit more from the street because it's their frontage versus the property that's deeper into the subdivision and also on a cul-de-sac, but it's determined, well, they have to drive on that street to get to their cul-de-sac, so they'll get something of an assessment, but it'll be a much smaller fraction because they don't have frontage, it's not their individual improvement sort of thing. So that's the goal, to try to spread the benefits and the costs in some sort of fashion that recognizes who's benefiting more or what lot's benefiting more and what's benefiting less.
So would I be right, to say, and please correct me, there's probably like some kind of algorithm that the engineers use, or I don't know if algorithm is the right word, but there's this certain way they do it, and you're not an engineer, so you wouldn't be able to explain it. And if the engineer did explain it, I'm not sure we would all understand it. Would that be right?
I would agree that I don't understand how they get there. I do double check every time, and maybe Ty and others at the city to make sure the fractions equal 100. And so this is tying out, everybody is getting assessed for this, but yeah, you're right. And sometimes the fractions are very small or very large, and I think sometimes it's based on a recognition or a classification of different levels of benefit. So sometimes it's just 2, and we see that with some of these assessments, a larger portion, smaller portion, but I've seen some here at the city where there might be 3 or 4 different levels. And that's based on, well, they've got to drive, or they have to use the street to get all the way into their subdivision or their cul-de-sac, or they're not going to use it much at all, but they have to use it a little bit. And so it's kind of recognizing these lots are in this group and they benefit a little bit, but not a lot. And these lots benefit a lot because it's right along their property. And so algorithm, I'm not sure, but sometimes the fractions are pretty complicated.
It does seem like reasonable that a citizen that wants to know why their fraction, what it is exactly what it is, you know, seems reasonable that they should be able to get that explanation. Is there a avenue for that, or?
Well, maybe. I mean, 3 years ago is when that engineering work would have been done and the resolutions adopted. It's, for a long time, and maybe this will be helpful, maybe it won't be, most assessments were just done equally per lot, just period. And then it's sort of easy to address the question of, well, how did you determine the assessment? Well, there were 20 lots and we divided by 20 and that's that. And the fractions really, I think, are an attempt to dig more deeply, particularly when you have 7 or 8 phases, to try to determine what lots are benefiting greatly, what lots are benefiting a little bit less. And so that is the answer, but how you get to the exact fraction is going to be probably discussing that with the original design engineer. But big picture, it's if your fraction's smaller, there's been recognition that your lot benefits less. And if it's larger, there's recognition your lot benefits more. And again, my earlier example is maybe the simplest, which is if you have frontage on the street improvement, then you're probably going to get the larger assessment if there's a distinction. Sometimes sewer and water is easier because everybody gets a connection to sewer and water, and you don't see the unusual fractions as much unless there was some sort of specialized lift station or something that had to serve a particular phase. So I don't know if I answered your question, probably partially, but not fully. But I know that's the big picture, and our role, and really your role as the governing body, when the petitions come before you, is just, does this recognize benefits in a way that isn't arbitrary? There's a reason for doing it this way, and it's not just picking and choosing. Well, that's, Bob Jones' lot. I don't like him, so he's going to get 95% of the. Then that's arbitrary. Versus the engineer has designed it this way and determined that traffic flow is going to be a certain way, so they benefit a little bit, but not a lot, and these folks benefit more. That's, again, kind of a high level discussion.
I thought we decided a while ago that in Sandra's particular case, that the reason she's getting 3 times more is that she's getting hit with all of her specials at once, and some of the other lots are only getting hit with part of their specials. They'll be hit again later with more. Ted's saying yes.
Right.
So
it
looks like she's getting hit with a lot, but what's really happening is she's just getting her specials earlier than some of her neighbors.
That's true, particularly if you're thinking about all of the improvements, the sewer, water, paving. That with the phased approach, it does arrive at different times, and sometimes your lot's one that gets all 4 or whatever the number of assessments are at once, and your neighbor may just be getting assessed for sewer right now because the streets are going to be designed in a different way. So that is true. But I think, back to your question, it's if we're looking at streets and somebody has a $14,000 assessment, somebody has 4, and it's based on a fraction just on the street improvement, that's kind of what I was talking about.
That was what I had.
Yeah, recognition of, on a particular improvement, there are varying levels of benefit.
All right, well, thank you very much. Any other questions or discussion we need to have on this issue? And we still are in the public meeting, so that's fine.
I think we need to call the vote on the motion.
Okay. If we're ready, then we can call the vote. I'll call for the vote on the motion. All in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Going on to item 4, special presentation. City's been spending millions of dollars for new streets as well as rehabbing existing roads. The questions always surface to the differences between asphalt and concrete. We know there is a price difference, but we also want to consider life of the pavement and future maintenance cost. David Edwards with GSI has studied these very issues and is here to share his findings. Mr. Edwards.
Thank you very much for inviting me. When Ty told me I was going to have 3.5 hours of uninterrupted time to talk about pavements, I got really excited.
He didn't tell you where, though.
Right. But just a little bit so you know who I am. GSI Engineering is a firm here in Wichita. We're about a 55-person engineering and testing firm. I've got 13 years of experience doing DOT work in New York and New England. I've been in Kansas doing the same for about 19 years. I also teach for K-State. So I'm not just coming to you as a paving contractor. I'm not here to sell you anything. I'm not here to do anything but inform you. So hopefully we'll go about 20 minutes or maybe even a little less. But what I've got is some examples to show you what happens between concrete and asphalt, how they wear differently. Actually walking into your building here tonight, and when you guys leave tonight, I encourage you to look at your concrete sidewalks. And then I think I was on the north side of the building. As you walk out across the concrete sidewalks and into your parking lot that's asphalt, just look at the difference. I'm guessing those were placed at the same time. There's a huge difference in the quality of those. But we'll jump into some things here. One of the things, and trust me when I say that you guys are not the only ones that have this question, and you're not the only ones that had approached me with this same question. It's going on everywhere. Most cities, your pavements and your sidewalks and your gutter and curb are probably the largest asset that you have total. It's a huge number. But a lot of people don't understand as engineers how we design it. A lot of what you're going to see tonight is from the city of Salina. They were under the impression when they come to me and they say, Dave, we want you to give us a 30-year pavement, that I was going to give them a pavement design that they would put in, and 30 years later they'd come back and replace it with no maintenance in between. And that's not at all the case. When we design pavements, that 30-year number is, by the end of 30 years, including the maintenance, we're expecting that pavement to be in such a poor condition that it needs to come out and be fully replaced. So a 30-year pavement is not a, hey, I'm going to put it in on day one and walk away and come back 30 years later and have a good pavement and replace it. So we're going to talk a little bit about what has to happen in between as well. So that design lifespan, that's the terminal serviceability. It's when is that pavement, its lifespan is done and it has to be replaced. We look at some things like axle loading. We look at regional factors of are your soils here very clayey versus very sandy, and are they going to expand and contract with moisture? Are they going to be pretty stable? Are they going to freeze? So all those things are into our calculations. Asphalt versus concrete, when we look at it overall, there's two big differences in them. Asphalt pavements are made from petroleum products. And if you've ever spilled gasoline on the floor somewhere, you know that the petroleum products don't stick around very long. They volatilize and go airborne. Asphalt is made like that. It's made from petroleum products that over time, when you put down a brand new road this year and it's black and beautiful and it looks perfect, and 6 months from now it's turning gray, that is the petroleum products leaving the asphalt and it's deteriorating. So that's kind of the biggest difference, where asphalt over time will typically degrade. Concrete, if you've ever tried to take out concrete that's been in your backyard for 30 years, it gets stronger with time. So a huge difference in one deteriorates and one gets better. I was looking at, Ann had given me a couple of your standard pavement sections just so I could compare them for you. So your asphalt section, it's 7 inches of asphalt pavement on 5 inches of reinforced stone. That reinforcement is like a snow fence that goes underneath it that separates the underlying soils from the rock so they don't kind of intermingle. Your standard concrete section is a little bit thinner. It's 6 inches of Portland cement concrete, but on the same subgrade. So really, cost-wise, when you're looking at it, the rock and the subgrade and everything are the same. The only difference is the cost of that 7 inches of asphalt versus the cost of 6 inches of concrete. The pros and cons, the reason, and I'm hearing a lot of things about improvement districts, the reason people like to go with asphalt is it's an initially lower cost. It typically goes in faster. So when you're assessing specials to a property, that lower initial cost gives lower assessments, and developers love that they can sell more homes. The flexibility of asphalt, because it is a petroleum product, it moves. It goes up and down with different deflections in the subgrade, which is sometimes good, sometimes bad. It's easily repaired, which is a big benefit. If you're going to do utility maintenance, if you're going to do pothole repair, Asphalt is far and away easier to repair than concrete. It's faster and cheaper. And then the last one, it can be overlaid, where we can overlay concrete, but to overlay concrete, we're typically having to chip some or grind some out to make enough room to get that asphalt or get that overlay in there. Asphalt, we can mill very simply. The millings are recyclable. We can use that on other roads that are not paved maybe. We can use that as a filler on those. Or we can actually recycle the pavement that we pull off the road and put it back into the new pavement. So there's some benefits there. On the con side, we lose the flexibility over time. When you walk out tonight and you look at your asphalt parking lot and you see cracks, we call it alligator cracking because it looks like alligator skin. As you go over time and we lose that flexibility, we start to crack. Once we start to get cracks and gaps and water gets in and it freezes or the water gets to the subgrade, all of a sudden that little clock that's running on the lifespan of the asphalt, that clock starts to run faster because we've got bad things going on underneath. We lose the soil support, we freeze and thaw, and that asphalt blows apart at a much more rapid pace. It does require a lot more frequent maintenance. What I'm going to show you here is typically every 4 to 5 years you need to be touching an asphalt road and doing maintenance on it, as compared to concrete, which is more of a, hey, I can put it in and 30 years later come back and look at it again. And then it does require resurfacing or replacement, but again, that's easier to do on this than it is on a concrete pavement. We can overlay, we can mill it, and do it really pretty quickly and not very expensively. The cement side, pros, it's definitely more durable. Again, when you walk out tonight and you go over the sidewalk, yeah, we're not getting the same traffic on the sidewalk as you are on the driving surface, but that concrete sidewalk will be out there for 40 years and you won't have much problem with it. Longer service life than asphalt, so when we say 30-year asphalt, we're probably talking 20 to 25 years. When we say 30 years on concrete, we're probably talking 30, 35, 40 years. It's usually a conservative estimate. More resistant to flooding and repeated exposures to water. I don't know if that's a big issue here. A lot of places in Kansas where I work, they're in the floodplain. When your asphalt pavements go underwater in a flood and there's traffic on them immediately after, they're done. That's a story over and we replace. Versus concrete, if it goes under and comes back up, it's usually not as big a deal. Lower maintenance than the asphalt we've talked about. On the cons, it is usually a higher construction cost up front. That's why the developers don't like to do it, because those specials go higher. We can lose the surface texture. This isn't as big an issue anymore because we've improved concrete, but that friction that you get on a new road goes away after time. When we start to run the surface off of the concrete and it gets a little less crusty, we lose some friction. But it's not, again, not as big as it was 15, 20 years ago. Concrete is better on rigid subgrades. It's a rigid piece of concrete that if you lose support underneath part of it, it can break and snap. But at the same time, it spans small holes better than asphalt, which just kind of falls into it and creates a pothole. And then we do require construction control joints. Some people on slow roads, 30-mile-an-hour roads, it's not a big deal, but we've all been on that highway trip and it's the thud, the thud, the thud for 4 hours. And that's kind of an annoying ride quality. So you trade those off. It's a pro or a con, depending on how you look at it. Then we were talking about typical historical uses. Really, asphalt has been predominantly city streets. Low volume, lower axle loads. It's because it's cheaper. We can put it in. There's more contractors typically that can do it. They're using it on road shoulders still, so even if we have a high-speed, high-traffic lane like an interstate, to reduce the cost, maybe we'll do concrete in the lanes, in the travel lanes, and then the curbs or the shoulders of the road we'll do an asphalt just because it's cheaper and we can get away faster, and it's not as critical for the ride quality. And then parking areas. On the cement side, high volume traffic, so the interstate highways, you're going to see more concrete on interstate highways because of the high axle loads. If you are rural Kansas and you follow any grain truck anywhere, you will not want to see asphalt roads because anywhere grain trucks go, you get that nice W-shaped road. When you have a concrete pavement, you won't see that. So that's part of the load characteristics again. Exit ramps, anywhere you have start-stop traffic. So you're seeing a lot more municipalities go to an intersection where we have maybe asphalt coming up to the intersection, but where all the turning traffic is or where we start and stop a lot. That starting and stopping and turning really takes a toll on asphalt because we can take that surface off really easy. And when it gets hot, when we're 100 degrees Fahrenheit ambient, that pavement surface, asphalt gets really hot, becomes pliable, and we can damage it really easy. So you'll see a lot of people right now trying to do the best of both worlds where we have straight line traffic. We'll do asphalt. When we come to that intersection where we know there's lots of starts and stops and turns, we'll go to concrete. And then curb and gutter, obviously with the flexibility of asphalt, we don't do asphalt curbs and gutters much, because if we do get that flexibility and we get a pothole or we get a little crater in there, we get bird baths that hold water, and then we go back to that. If we get a crack and the water goes down, things expedite really quickly when we decay. This is a program that I did. It was ideal. It was in Salina, Kansas. It was a subdivision where they did one road per year. So I was able to see from year number 2, so this pavement was 2 years old, the next street in was 3 years old, the next street in was 4 years old, but it was all the same pavement mix. It was all the same subdivision, all the same preparation, everything was the same. So I could actually see what happens year to year to year, and you'll be really surprised what you see. So year number 1, it was brand new. Year number 2, you can see the concrete or asphalt is turning a little bit grayer. We're just starting to see just a little bit of cracking. I think that was over a utility line. So that flexibility we were talking about, if there was a utility line there and the backfill wasn't good, we see that little divot in the road and we get a reverse speed bump. This is year 3. We're starting to see a little bit more cracking. This is a pen that I set out on the road, so you can see that the width of the crack is growing. Again, as those light oils dissipate, that takes up volume, and when that volume disappears, we shrink. Cold weather, it'll shrink, and we'll start to open those gaps up. Once they open up, they don't go back. It's not when it heats up, it expands back out and fills those in. So these will just grow over time as those light oils go away. That crack will widen and widen and widen. Year number 4, again, this is not a very old pavement, 4 years old. Now we're seeing, we call these transverse that are 90 degrees to travel, and longitudinal down the center line of the road. See those cracking? And again, I believe this was a utility line, so the flexibility over those utility lines where we saw it before, hey, it's starting to dip. Now all of a sudden we're getting a really good reverse speed bump in there.
Question.
Yeah.
On the longitudinal cracks, is that probably where there was one piece of asphalt down and then another one?
It is. So that's the natural tearing point, and then the road is typically crowned to a V in the center. So as time goes on and the road wants to shrink, it's going to shrink in the 2 directions where it's easiest, and it's going to tear along that center line. So both, but excellent observation. So here we're in year 5. You can tell that these guys have already gone and done some pretty aggressive crack sealing. We're starting to see cracks propagate right along the curb line. Again, that's kind of a function of construction. We have a concrete curb there. We have to put forms in. When we pull the forms out, probably 6 or 8 inches away from that, we have to backfill. So this could be shrinking of the concrete or shrinking of the asphalt, or it could be just a construction practice where we didn't get good compaction. If that was a concrete pavement versus asphalt, you wouldn't see that. That just wouldn't be there. So that's year 5. Year 6, you can see they've really gone aggressive. Again, same pavements all the way through here. There's nothing different about them, nothing special. But those transverse cracks you can see here are really starting to get more and more frequent and wider. And then the center line, we're really getting 2 sets of cracks down there, so our crack sealing costs are going up. And this is pretty bad for a 5-year-old, 6-year-old pavement. That's pretty aggressive decay. But that gives you an idea of how quickly things can go south on asphalt pavements. Same thing, Salina, this is 2 subdivisions away. This one is a little less populated subdivision, but it's a 3-year-old concrete pavement. This one really made me mad, and I'll tell you why in a second. But that's a 3-year-old concrete pavement. It looks pretty good with the exception of what you see here. That's right down the center. The reason that happened, poor design. So again, we have a concrete pavement that the middle of the road is peaked, so it flows, all the runoff from the rain goes to either gutter. Instead of putting a joint down the center of the road where they should have put it, so that when it cracked, it would crack in the center where we want it to, they actually just did 3 equal panels. So this is the center of the road where the peak is. That's why we have a crack there. It really wasn't so much a material problem as it was a design problem. So if they'd put the joint in the right position, we probably wouldn't see any cracks in this road at all. This is another comparison. This is the subdivision in the background is where I just showed you those 6 years of asphalt photos. So this is opposite side of the street. Here's concrete pavement. This line right here is a demarcation. They actually did this portion of the road first. They created this road and put this asphalt in after. So this asphalt and this concrete are the same age. This is a year or 2 older. but you can see the performance difference between concrete and asphalt. And crack sealing, and Ann probably can tell you, I can't tell you how crack sealing goes because it depends on how much you do at a time. But it can be expensive if you don't do a lot. It can still be expensive if you do a lot because you have a lot to do. But it's a high maintenance cost. So the economics, and I just wanted to give you some real simple stuff to think about. Construction on new asphalt, it's usually less expensive, but it's going to require some ongoing maintenance, and that's going to be everything from those cracks that you saw being sealed. If we get potholes, we're going to have to do it right, we've got to cut those out and replace them. And the one that most people are mixing is that sealant on the surface. Those pavements you saw that are 4, 5, 6 years old, at 4 years it still looked pretty good. At 5 years, you can see it start to accelerate the deterioration. At 6 years, it looked pretty bad. If we'd have gotten in there at year 4 and done a surface sealant, everybody probably, if you have an asphalt driveway, you've probably done that. Kind of rejuvenates it. But really what that does is gives you a seal to keep the light oils from leaving, and that's what kills our flexibility, and that's what ruins our pavements is when we lose those oils. So it's one of those where when I help people with designs, they say, should we put something in there to seal this in 4 or 5 years? Absolutely. If you can get that money in there and it can stay there for that, it'll lengthen the lifespan of your pavements, sometimes 5, 10, 15 years. But when I'm talking about maintenance, when we say 30-year pavement or 20-year pavement, it's not a set it and forget it. It's every 5 years you need to be doing something to that pavement, whether it's crack sealing, potholes, or hopefully a sealant. So the simple part of it, if we say asphalt pavement's got a span of 20 years when we put it down, and we just say conservatively concrete's got 30 years, that means asphalt's got to be a third less expensive when we put it in to get the same cost per year. Does everybody that make sense? So if we even say, hey, if we do a little maintenance and we take that 20-year lifespan of asphalt to 25 years, what's the difference? Okay, now we've got to have 20% less expensive than concrete, again, to get the same cost per year. So that's a big difference. In speaking with Ann, she said they just did a project here for a new subdivision, and the prices between the two were 12% or 15% different? 12%. So asphalt was 12% cheaper, but in the long run, is that really cheaper? And take in mind, this is just initial construction costs. This does not include any maintenance that you're going to do. So all of a sudden, we start adding maintenance on top of that, and those numbers are going to be bigger. So instead of a 20%, maybe we're 25 or 30% difference. It's got to be 30% cheaper in initial construction, that over the lifespan, it's less expensive overall. So we start adding those pothole repair, surface sealing, and quite honestly, most municipalities ignore that. And I'm going to show you why we do that, because it's super easy. If you just say, hey, I'm going to let it go for 30 years and then I'm going to replace it because maintenance is too expensive, I'll show you that downfall. So long-term maintenance economics, surface sealant, and I just picked one. And coal tar is not, in my opinion, a great one, but it's the least expensive one, so that's what usually people want to do. So about $1 a square yard, so about $1 for 9 square feet of surface coverage to put coal tar down. It makes it black, it makes it look good, it seals it for a year or two. It is not a 5-year maintenance program, it's a 2 or 3 or 4 year maintenance program. So we say a typical city street up here, I think yours are vary from about 26 feet to 30, I think, you guys. So I used your 30 foot, and I used 1/8 of a mile, which is a standard city block. So 660 feet, if you just put that coating on it every 2 years, you'd be spending $2,200 or every 3 years for that one little section of it. That equates to $17,000 or $17,600 for 1 mile of street. Again, that's probably every 2 to 3 years to do it effectively. To treat 1 mile of road 4 times, so if we did it every 5 years for the 20-year lifespan, we're looking at $70,000 in maintenance cost. And that's bare bones minimum if you did that. Most of the higher quality sealants, you're probably looking $2.50 a square yard. So it's much higher than that, but you get a much bigger bang. You go from a 2-year period, maybe you go to a 5 or a 10-year period in between them. So typically the better you do, or the higher quality you do, the less frequent you have to do it. So here's the real example from Bel Aire. Ann was telling me it's about $51,000 less, or about 12% less on this one project that you're doing. So I back calculated it based on the area she told me. So Asphalt was $424,000 for that project. Concrete, if it was 12% higher, would have been $475,000. And then I just divided them out for you. So if this lasts for 20 years, it's $21,000 a year versus concrete at $15,000. So the difference is about $6,000 a year if one lasts 20 and one lasts 30. And I can tell you this one will last more than 30. This one may last more than 20. So we said, let's look at 25. So at 25, we dropped from 21,000 to about 17,000. So still about $1,000 a year more on that project per year of cost, if that makes sense. So looking at that, after 25 years, asphalt's 6.6% more expensive than concrete if you add the things in there. Again, not including any maintenance cost. That's just original cost over how long will it last, kind of a simple cost per year. And if you added coal tar, the cheapest one that we looked at, on that project, it'd be about a $5,000 every 2 to 3 years that you would add in addition to that cost. So it starts adding up 1% every time you put the coal tar seal on that. Any questions on that one? It's hard to convey this, I guess, but so far so good.
It's a heck of a lot easier to understand than the tax stuff.
So other things to consider when we're doing it, properly maintaining asphalt. In general, we look at 3 to 5% of the cost of replacing it for maintenance. And that's not on an annual basis. That's kind of if I do something every 5 years, 3 to 5% of my total cost to replace is what I should be spending on it. So if we're looking at seal coating, some of the better seal coats that are $2.50 or $3 a square yard, that would get us close to our 3 to 5% number. If we're doing that every 5 years or 10 years, that's going to add up, but it's still a lot cheaper than replacing the road. So the percentages, we look at, if we have to tear 1 mile of road out and replace it, the equivalent maintenance on other roads is 20 miles. We're going to talk about what happens to people who are politicians who get, hey, I got a bad road, and you say, you're right, you got a bad road, and we go fix that 1 mile versus save 20, and I'm going to show you what that does to your budget. So we talked about the asphalt overlays. The Portland cement side, really the maintenance cost is pretty small. There's going to be some panels here and there over the lifespan of the concrete that are going to crack and need to be replaced. There's some crack sealing on joints and things that we have to do, but we're not out there spending $3.75 a square yard every 5 years to seal it. That's the big benefit to it. So here's a really long, drawn-out example for you, but I think this really helps you try to understand what happens in a 5-year period. So if with this year we just replaced 1 mile of bad concrete, and I just estimated $1 million a mile. I think Ann's example, if we actually expanded hers out to do the whole road, it's about $1.5 million a mile. So $1 million a mile is kind of conservative right now. And then 1 mile of poor road, if we had to redo that, we'd use our entire $1 million budget for this year to do that 1 mile of road, and we wouldn't maintain anything else. We'd do no improvements. And these are just made up numbers. I don't know what your actual budget is, but I'm just doing this to illustrate. So number two, 2021, a year from now, 2 miles of unmaintained roads, the stuff that we didn't spend money on to improve or maintain. Now we've got 2 miles of that has to be repaired. So we've only got $1 million in the budget. We can only do 1 mile of that. So we fix 1 mile, and then we have 1 mile that's going to be not good road. And while that's being done, again, we spent no money. We've spent our whole $1 million fixing roads instead of repairing, or replacing roads instead of repairing. So now we've got another 2 miles that have gone down south on us. So we have 1 left over from this year we didn't do, plus 2 more that fell into disrepair. So now next year we've got 3 miles we've got to do. We still got that $1 million budget. So now we've got 1 mile replaced, 2 miles in bad condition, 2 more miles go into poor condition. And you can just see these numbers at $1 million a mile. After that first year, hey, we need $3 million to fix the 3 miles of road. The next year we lose more. We got to go to $4 million to fix that. By the time you get to 2024, we've got 6 miles of poor road to fix. We've got another 3 miles typically going south on us, so we're looking at 9 miles that we have to fix. We've spent our budget to fix 1. We've done no maintenance. So the long and the short of it's down here. So in a 5-year period, what have we done? We got 5 miles of new road. We've got 8 miles that we need to fix still that are in bad shape. We've got no maintenance on anything else, so all the roads that we haven't done maintenance on are going to start to, that period it's going to start to expedite. Instead of 2 miles a year, now we're going to go to 3 or 4 miles a year, and it's just going to keep getting bigger and bigger. So you're looking at an $8 million cost to fix the road. So then what do you guys do as a council? Do we have to go out there and assign a special tax? Do we have to go out there and bond issue to get those roads back up? If you don't believe me, go to Wellington. I mean, they are so far underwater because this is not what they've been doing. They've not been maintaining what's good. They've been trying to fix what's really bad. And in the period they've been fixing the really bad, the stuff that's really good has gone to be really bad. So hopefully that makes sense. Here's the flip side of it. If we took that same $1 million budget and in the first year we went out and we protected 20 miles of good roads, stuff that's in great shape right now, and we coated that, and we're in year 1 to 4, we go out and maintain those 20 miles. That's 20 miles we don't have to worry about a year from now, 2 years, or 5 years from now. The next year we go down and, hey, we've done quite a bit, but let's just do 10 miles. That gives us another $500,000 to replace parts of that bad road that we already had. The next year, we only do 5 miles because we've already taken care of 30 miles of road. We should be catching up on things, again, just fictitious numbers. But that gives us $750,000. We're not losing roads to disrepair as fast because we've been maintaining things. We're not losing 2 miles or 3 miles a year. We're losing half a mile, or we're losing 3/4 of a mile. So we can take care of that in our budget now. As we get down, the same thing at the bottom. 5-year example on this one, we've saved 45 miles of good pavement. That's far ahead of where we were on example 1. So we've got 45 miles of good road. We've replaced 3. If you remember the first example, I think we only replaced 5 in the first example. This one we've replaced 3, we've maintained 45, and we're down to, if we can keep that road from deteriorating, we've got stuff that's doable. Next year's budget, we've only got to do a half mile. We've got that in the budget. We're not going out there looking for a bond issue. We're not going out there and hitting people with specials. So if you're going to do asphalt, this is a huge thing for asphalt. You've got to do a maintenance program. You've got to understand, and you can't bend, and I understand where you're all sitting, that you get phone calls from, and you get people that show up in your meetings and tell you how bad their roads are. But this hopefully will give you some ammunition to say, hey, look, we could go out there and save your road, but we're going to lose 40 miles of road in the next 5 years if we do your road. Give us time. Give us 3 years. Give us 4 years, and your road will be brand new. And then once we get it brand new, it's going to stay brand new. But this is the hardest part for you as politicians, to go out there and look at the people who are electing you and saying, my road stinks, you stink, because you're not fixing my road. And then you've got to come back and have something in your arsenal to tell them, hey, look, we've got a plan. And I think if you tell people you have a plan, and your road's not going to be this year, maybe it's not next year, but in 3 years, we've got your road covered, and we're going to have other roads, and everything's going to be better. So that's kind of the big part of it. The other thing I wanted to let you know is not all pavements and not all repairs are the same, and there's people out there selling everything, and based on your price point and how much you can do in a year, that's a real persuasive argument that, hey, I could put coal tar down and make everything look pretty. I could spray paint the roads for 2 years for $1 a square yard, or I could do something that's going to keep my roads for 5 or 10 years for $2.75 a square yard. Okay, so let's protect more with better, or run the numbers. Maybe that's all we've got to do is coal tar. If that's our budget, that's our budget. But let's do something, let's not ignore it. We talked about conventional concrete. A lot of the ones I showed you in the pictures, they actually do it like your driveway. We come out and we set forms and we pour concrete and we finish it. I know you guys have done some roller compacted concrete up here. A personal favorite of mine, that just lasts forever. The first project when I moved here in 2001, if you guys are familiar, I think it's or Nissan now. That Nissan dealership is roller compacted concrete. And I drive by there all the time still and go in and look. There's one crack in that whole parking lot. And that's nearly 20 years old. And they're putting trucks full of cars on there. So it's not a lightly used pavement. It's a, hey, we're bringing 30 cars in on a tractor trailer and parking on it, and all the traffic in and out. I could talk to you for another hour about that and why it's good. But roller compacted typically can go cheaper if you have long straight ways. If you're doing cul-de-sacs, it's not made to go in curvy roads, so it's not as good there. But it's usually cheaper than conventional if you can get a long straightaway. Other things that they're going to put out there, the fog seal. You know, it's not even as good as spray painting the road, in my opinion. So if you're going to try to sell you on a fog seal, that would be one where you take that money and put it in towards something better. Do less road, but do a better job. Chip seals are okay. Mills and overlays, you know, if you can maintain a decent undersection and just the top couple inches is getting gray because it's weathered, but an inch or two underneath it is looking great, we can go through there and mill that top asphalt off and put another 2 inches on and get another 10 years out of it. So just another thing in your arsenal to look at. And then things that are coming up, the warm recycled asphalt, the cold recycled asphalt, where we're adding different epoxies and things. We're milling up your street, putting an epoxy in it, putting it back down. So just all different things that you can consider. They're all different budget levels. And usually the higher, just with anything, the higher the budget level, the longer it's going to last. That was really, I was hoping you didn't have the 3-minute timer set because baby, I was.
I think it went off 4 or 5 times.
Right. I do have some questions, and I think that our city engineer does a great job with maintaining the roads, with trying to be the proactive and keep the roads that are in good shape so we don't have to replace those. We've been working that project for, I don't know, how many years have you been doing that? 5 years or more? 5 years. Okay, so, and that's great. I think
it's going to definitely pay dividends. It's probably right at that point where you're breaking the curve. So.
And it does hurt, you know, we do have some roads that need to be replaced, and we know that, and it does hurt us being able to do that, but we are getting some breathing room there. Are you familiar with a project called Reclamate?
I'm familiar with it. I'm not.
So a year and a half ago, we had a presentation on that, and we sealed some roads in Reclamate. Is that what? Yes. Okay, and we sealed some roads with that. So in your priority of different types of repairs there, where does that fit into that priority?
And I'm not all that familiar with Reclamite. Probably my most favorite right now locally. They have a product, and it's Andale Construction has it, and it's called HA5. And it's from the Holbrook Asphalt Company. That's where the HA comes from. It's kind of like WD-40. You know, the 40th formulation was the best. So HA5, and it's a combination of from Mundum, which is the aggregate they use on grinding wheels. And the stuff is, you know, not quite diamond, but it's tough. And then it's more of an epoxy than it is an asphalt. So when they put it down, it's not going to off-gas like a petroleum product like normal asphalt does. It's an epoxy, so it's more like a plastic. And that stuff, the downside of it is it's not really approved yet for high speed. So you can't, if you've got a 65-mile-an-hour road, which I don't know if you have any 65-mile roads. Rock Road when I came in was, but
Maybe everybody driving it.
Yeah, I was talking to your local law enforcement about road quality. But it holds up very, very well. And I've seen applications where they've put it on, and 10 years later, it looks like it just was put on yesterday. They've used it on 21st Street over in Andover, right outside one of Cornejo's concrete plants. So it's got tractor-trailer traffic hauling stone in all day and concrete trucks going out all night. And other than the dust that's on the surface of it, that stuff looks as good. It was probably 5 years ago that they put that on. It looks as good now as it did that day. But again, that's a higher dollar value.
That's a treatment you do on an asphalt road?
Yes, that's an asphalt treatment. And then the other thing that I've been telling people across the state is on the initial asphalt installation, we used to have a one-size-fits-all. The Kansas DOT had a BM product, was bituminous material, and everybody just did BM2, and it was just a standard, and everybody used it everywhere. But now we're using different types of asphalt. That oil, the heavy oils that we put in there are actually chemically altered to perform during different periods of temperature. So we'll specify a low temperature range and a high temperature range on the asphalt. And using those, we used to call it super pave, but now it's not really called super pave anymore. It's kind of becoming a standard. But we're seeing that stuff is going to last without the cracks and things that you're seeing in those Salina pavements. It'll last 15 years if you have the right formulation without seeing big cracks in it. So again, it's a little more expensive because it's not you're not going to the asphalt plant and buying the stuff off the shelf. You're asking them for something a little bit special that they're going to make just for you. So it's a little more expensive, but it's definitely worth that initial investment because the longevity is 2 or 3 times the normal asphalt.
When you call coal seal, is that the same as we hear slurry seal? Is that the same product that you're talking about?
The coal tar is kind
Coal
of the same
tar.
stuff you see on your driveways.
Yeah.
It's a thinner version of it.
Oh, it's a thinner version of that, okay, all right.
I had a question. I'm wondering who the people, it seems from the presentation with, asphalt's more expensive over the long run. But who are the people pushing that? I mean, I could see where the city could be motivated to do it for temporary cost reduction. We might get short-sighted and could get pushed into that. I could see developers wanting it. But I'm trying to figure out what the motivations would be for asphalt. It seems like it's just, the more expensive way to go.
And I can tell you that I have an administrative assistant who lives here in Bel Aire, and she was grabbing me by the belt loops and pulling me back into the office tonight, telling me, whatever you tell them, they're going to do a project on my road. I want whatever's the fastest. And that is a big benefit of asphalt. You go out there and you put it down and roll it, and as soon as it's cool, you put traffic on it, versus concrete, we're looking at 7 to 10 days usually before we'll put traffic on it. Roller compacted, I think, might be a little faster than that. But yeah, I mean, that was, and I'm not kidding, she was very concerned about, hey, there's one way in and one way out, and it's just miserable if it takes them 3 months to do that. Whatever is the fastest, that's what I want. So again, that's a political battle that you guys have to fight, that as engineers I don't. I just hide in my corner and put my...
So what was in your analysis that you did there with the asphalt and the maintenance of the asphalt, what was the material you were using? Was it the coal tar for the maintenance?
On those roads, they were just doing crack sealing.
Just crack sealing.
They had
They
no,
weren't doing
because they were only 6 years old, they hadn't applied any sealant to them at all. And I think that's why you were seeing those cracks develop so fast and so wide. And then that asphalt also was not the super pave asphalt, it was the one-size-fits-all asphalt.
Okay.
So it wasn't graded specifically for Salina's temperature range, and it was a little bit more off the shelf and a little bit less durable.
So you had an example there where you said it was 33% more cost on the asphalt because of the maintenance. And so I was wanting to understand, what was the material you were using in the maintenance analysis?
No, in the 33% was if you just looked at asphalt and said, when I put it down, it's got a 20-year lifespan versus a 30-year lifespan on
With
concrete.
no maintenance?
Yeah.
Oh.
It's just, hey, it's got to be 33% cheaper when you put it in because it's only going to last 2/3 as long.
Okay, okay.
So that was that 33%, and that was without maintenance.
Without maintenance, okay, okay.
Because that's
I didn't
creeping up.
understand that part of it.
If you start to do maintenance, you're looking maybe at 40%. It has to be 40% cheaper up front, that over a 30-year period, they equal out to the same.
Okay.
What's your opinion if concrete starts to reach end of life of putting asphalt on top of it?
And if you do it correctly, I am encouraged by it. Most people don't want to do it's just like painting your home. If you don't do the scraping and you don't do the preparation and you put new paint over crappy paint, it's going to come off. So if you have to go back in there and do it, then we really recommend that you do a good media blast or a surface grind and then get the surface cleaned, and then you'll get a good adhere and it won't peel off. New England states, where I came from, with high freeze thaw, and we use lots of salt on the roads, that was standard construction. Is we would build a bridge with concrete. We would put a plastic membrane over the surface to keep the water from going through and rusting the underlying steel, and then we'd put 2 inches of asphalt over it, and that was our standard section everywhere we went, and it lasted magnificently.
How thick of concrete did you do that with, and did you cut it down to 3 inches of concrete,
No,
2 inches?
on those, it was really, the concrete was the bridge deck, so it was a structural, so they were probably 6 or 7 inches thick. But we could get a bridge to last 60 years versus 20 years because the concrete reinforcing steel wasn't rusting. We weren't getting salt water from the road treatments
I'm
down.
just questioning whether we should go to a mixed media for our new roads. I know it's gonna take a lot longer because this
Yeah.
concrete's gotta cure first, but
And I really recommend that you go one or the other. And if you go concrete, in a couple of years, if you have to go back and redo it, you can always do an overlay. The problem with concrete on doing an overlay is it's much harder and much more expensive to grind it. So where you have to meet existing curb lines in the city, you have to either go and do 2 inches of milling on the edge out a couple of feet, so that when you do the new overlay, it matches your curb and gutter. And that's the downside to it. It's more expensive. But if you're on a rural road and you have no curb and gutter, you can go right over the top and regrade the edges of the road with a shoulder
what
gravel.
happens if your asphalt's 2 inches higher than your gutter?
Then you start plugging things up. Either overflow your gutters or...
Well, don't put it in the gutter, but I mean, just put leave the gutter the existing size and bring the asphalt just a little higher than the,
Oh, I'm gonna say there's probably issues with ADA on that, wouldn't you? Yeah.
trip hazards? Okay. I'm asking that because that's what they did to my neighborhood when I was a kid. I was fine at that time, so,
Didn't have ADA then.
Yeah, no, we
but
just,
it lasted a really long time, so.
yeah, we just did an addition on our building, and I put a 1/8 high sweep under the door because I was getting wind blowing through, and I had to remove it because that was not ADA compliant. That 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch was too high. So I can't imagine if we did 2 inches, anybody would like that. And I think,
Not thought at that point.
So
the
early
next-
in your, oh, I'm sorry.
yeah, the next big thing that I think Ann will tell you is when you go back and redo roads, they require now, if you've got federal money in there, that you have to make everything ADA compliant. And an ADA compliant intersection is probably as much as the road. So when you're going back and having to redo things, so you have to look at the wording in the DOT documents, because if you do a fog seal or if you do some of these other things, they're maintenance. And if you do maintenance, it's not a requirement that you upgrade everything to ADA compliant. But as soon as you start tearing out and replacing, then all of a sudden you have to bring everything up to ADA compliance, which means the curb and gutter and the textured ramps in and out and the signs and signals that go with it. And that is typically as much to do that on an intersection as the rest of the road between the intersections is. So that's one I fail to tell people about a lot, that it comes back to haunt you that, oh, well, he said we should do this, and then you go to do that and you say, well, we can't spend $50,000 on that because the intersection alone is $50,000 for the equipment. So you have to keep that in your mind when you're doing it.
What about the city of Wichita where they've got all these brick crosswalks? I've seen those fall apart. Is that a bad idea and they just didn't know at the time, or?
Yeah, and I think that's more of an architectural thing. And I just see when a snowplow goes through in the winter, I just see bricks coming up all the time. So yeah, it's not something I would certainly recommend. And if you want to do that, the city of Salina, I've been working with for a long period of time, and they're taking out all their old brick roads, and they can't get rid of that brick. So if you want it, if you just drive
What would you suggest then, stamped concrete or something to give it a little bit of
I
a
think-
unique look?
Yeah, I think so, or colored concrete, just something to separate it. But the brickwork is just, it doesn't seem to take very long for that to come apart. And then to get it reoriented correctly, it's almost impossible. That if one brick comes out, you just can't take it back and put it in. You end up tearing out 40 or 50 to get one back in, so it's maintenance pig.
Early in your presentation, you talked about subgrade, and you said that our standard in Bel Aire was the same for both cement and asphalt, and that's probably appropriate. Do you have any recommendations that we would, of improvements that we might make in those standards that we have, or are those pretty solid?
What
the
you
way they
have
are?
is pretty standard. You're very similar to most other municipalities around here. Where we get into really expansive clays, we do like to treat those with fly ash. We used to be the primary one, and it's now a commodity that you can only find very small amounts, so the price has gone through the roof. We used to use lime. We don't recommend lime. We've kind of found that lime only lasts for about a 7 to 10 year window, and then just like in an ag field, when you put lime on an ag field, it only lasts so long, and then the pH changes. So we've gone to cement kiln dust, which is just a byproduct of when they make cement. It's the leftover dust from that. And we use Portland cement. Those are the two big ones now. The reason we like those is we can use those in a wider range of weather conditions. So even if you have cold weather where we couldn't use fly ash just because the chemical reaction wouldn't work, Portland cement or cement kiln dust we can use at temperatures below freezing as long as the ground isn't frozen. So we can keep construction going right through bad climate.
Is that the same as the term cement stabilization?
Yes.
Okay. Is that typically what we're doing? Yeah.
No, we don't do any cement stabilization here. That is very similar to Andale's slurry seal process, or their super slurry, I'm sorry, I keep getting those. But they do inject a cement mixture into the soil, compact it, and let it cure, and then go through it. They call it micro cracking, so there's little cracks in that subgrade, so it's not so hard, but that is what we've done on some of the streets.
Okay. All right.
That is a great product as well. The alternative to it is we put dry powder on the surface and try to push dry powder into the ground as deep as we can. With Andales, it's actually a fluid that they put in 9 or 10 inches below grade and let it come to the surface, so we know we've got full coverage. When we do it with the dry powder, being an aircraft community, it's difficult to do that in any kind of a windy day and not upset someone. So there's a couple good things going on with the fluidized part, and the quality control of it is much better, and then the airborne particulates are gone, which is great.
Mr. Mayor, I got a couple questions.
Sure.
I was curious, if we know asphalt shrinks over time and tends to get those cracks, why do we not put joints in asphalt lays the way we do with concrete?
It's more of a ride quality issue. As you're going down the road, nobody likes that. That's one of the benefits when they're talking about why asphalt is great. It's one continuous long, and if you go out there on Rock Road right now that they just redid, there's not a thump in the whole road. Come back and we'll talk 2 years from now, and that ride quality will go. And then as soon as you make a perforation or penetration through a pavement, all of a sudden you've made a pathway for water to enter the underlying soils, and once we do that, once the soils lose their strength or they get wet and they swell, we start to move the road, and then the deterioration is expedited again.
Okay. My follow-up was also, is it possible, and if so, why don't we put sealant on asphalt right after we initially put it down?
Absolutely, it's a great thing because it would keep those oils in. It's usually a cost benefit that you just spent a whole bunch of money, and if you're going to do it, everybody says, well, I'm going to wait 3 years until I know that that's when things are going to go south and put it on, and then when I put it on, it'll give me another 5. Versus I have a brand new road and I'm going to put it on and I'll get 5. So if I wait 3, I actually put it on in 3 and I'll get another 5, so I've got 8 years of service. Versus I put it on now and I've got a brand new road that in 5 years that surface will come off and I'll have to do it again. So it's an economics typically that it would be a great thing to put on there. But you don't see the benefit. And then when I'm talking about, hey, we can maintain more roads, I would encourage you to go the other direction and say, let's put the new road in now and let's find one that's 4 years old and put that sealant on that road instead of this road. And then 4 years from now, we'll go back and hit this one. And you would actually perpetuate more roads with the same amount of money.
Okay, thank you.
You probably maybe already answered this with the HA5, but is there anything that you say we need to keep a lookout that you think maybe in 5 or 10 years might be a great idea, but maybe isn't a great idea yet, but things that are on the horizon that we need to be looking out for?
And I'm sure there are more of these that have the harder aggregates because everybody is trying to duplicate that and improve on it. So I haven't seen any that have come out yet. I think Holbrook, it took them probably 10 to 15 years to develop what they have now. And everybody else is kind of trying to play the catch-up game. And I'm sure the DuPonts and those kind of people are going to have stuff in the near future. I just don't know of any right now.
There's a product out there, I don't know anything about this, so it's just a question. Tire-derived aggregate, where they're using recycled tires to aggregate I guess it's the asphalt they're doing that with. Are you familiar with that, or rubber-modified asphalt?
I've seen it. I'm not a fan of it. Okay. And then one of the other things in asphalt is to reduce the cost of asphalt. We talked about the recycling side of it. So what they'll go and do is we'll go out and mill a road somewhere, and the asphalt cuttings that come off that road we'll take and put back into new asphalt. And depending on who you talk to and who the engineer is, they'll allow you to use different amounts of the recycled material. But the recycled material, just like tires, it's not consistent. So if I went out and ground down one of your roads that's been out there for 25 years, there would be more stone and very little of the asphalt material left. And then that might be mixed in there with, hey, we just made a mistake on Rock Road, that even though it's brand new, we're going to go mill that off and mix that into the same stuff. So it's very difficult to control the overall quality of the new material when you have recycled stuff in there. So we've been telling people we sure don't like to see anything more than 25% of the recycled material in there. We would prefer to have 15% or less, because just think about taking household hazardous waste and everybody brings you some paint, and you're trying to make one color, but these guys are bringing you gray and you're bringing me blue and he's bringing me white, and we say, well, it's all the same, and we dump it in there and we try to make that color. We're doing the same thing with different asphalts from different places. Some have bigger stone, some have smaller stone, some have more asphalt, some have less asphalt. Some have the super pave asphalt, some have that off the rack stuff. So it's very difficult to control the quality. And the same thing, when you start adding tires into it, it's anybody's guess as to what you're going to get.
So in this area, and if I don't understand this correct, please tell me so, but we only really have APAC we can buy asphalt from. Is that correct, or are there other sources?
Cornejo is here in town.
They also do asphalt. They're also
Flint
make
Hills.
make
Flint
asphalt.
Hills, Kansas paving.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're all making it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I made the assumption they were all buying it from APAC, but
No, they all
bad
have their own.
assumption.
They all have their own plants.
Okay.
Well, how are we doing? Is this helping?
Yeah.
Is this,
This is great.
Another question. Coke spared no expense on their road. Do you know what they used on 37th Street?
I don't know. I would guess it would be the super paved materials. It really is a huge difference between that. Hey, KDOT has, and this is one of the problems when you have out-of-town engineers working in your area, that if you don't know what's local, you go to the DOT books and you pick out the one that looks best to you. So if you don't know, we have blended aggregates and blended asphalts here. They just say, well, I read in the KDOT book where BM2 is what you use, so I'm just going to do that. And we're working on a couple projects with out-of-town engineers right now where they've actually given us the benefit of, hey, we know we did this and we're not local. Please look at this and let us know. So we give them those, hey, this asphalt is not a well-graded and it's going to give you a 4 or 5 year lifespan and it's going to start cracking. But if we use this, it's slightly more expensive, but it's going to give you a 10 or 15 year lifespan without seeing cracks. And most people are pretty agreeable.
So I've not experienced any of these 40-year cement roads around here. Do you know of any examples of these 40-year cement roads?
Boy, I'm going to tell you the one that I did down there at Or Nissan will be there for 60 years, easy.
Okay, in the parking lot. Right.
And
Okay.
one of the other things about roller compacted concrete and concrete in general, a big part or big component in Portland cement concrete is water. So when we put the water in there, it's trapped in the matrix of the concrete, and then we start to get freezing weather, and that water expands and blows apart. And if we don't have good air void systems through the concrete, that's when we start to see our concrete spall. Roller compacted concrete comes in almost dry. It looks like dry soil. And I think you guys have done it here. I don't know if you've seen it, but when they compact it so densely that they essentially squeeze the water out of it, and it can freeze quickly and still not have any bad sides of what you see on normal concretes. So it's very dense. It's very hard wearing. I lived down in Wichita. We had a huge storm come through. Our roads are all asphalt. They said, hey, bring your branches and things out to the side of the road and we'll pick them up. So everywhere they came through with a loader and picked up branches, I now have every tooth mark from that loader is all the way across our road. If you did that on a concrete pavement, you wouldn't see that. There might be a couple of white scratches there and the concrete bucket might be missing some teeth because the guy, so things like that, the durability of Portland cement versus asphalt, if you have those kind of issues, it's night and day. But Highway 50, I'm actually working on, not in this county, but Highway 50, I just did a whole bunch of cores on that. I think that concrete's been there since the 40s. They do have an asphalt overlay over it because some of the joints had started to wear. But that thing, you couldn't tell the difference between that today and 20 years ago for sure.
What county is that in?
I would have to look. It was for a project where they were bringing wind turbines in, and they were worried about the integrity of the road because it was so old.
So it's probably up near Hutchinson because that's where they build them, right?
It was north and east of there. It was quite a ways,
Okay.
somewhere between here and Kansas City. I can't really remember, but
Okay.
I mean they're there. If you look, I mean interstate, the Eisenhower turnpikes and stuff, the interstate highways, those were 40s and 50s, right? And a lot of those are still the original concrete on those.
I know Highway 81 south of the Oklahoma border to about Medford is concrete that's been there probably since about the 40s. It was old when I first heard about it. And they have come through and put asphalt on it mainly because the road was too narrow. They kind of added some shoulders, which.
No, I mean they really are there. In non-interstate applications, we typically end up screwing them up ourselves through, hey, we have to go and replace a water line or we have to go put a utility through there before their lifespan is really over. So that's the downside of it.
We've seen that a lot. All right, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Edwards?
Good. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the time. Okay, we'll move on to item 5, ordinance resolutions and final actions. So item A is to consider appointing of 3 voting delegates and 3 alternative voting delegates for the 2020 annual meeting of the League of Kansas Municipalities. The annual league meeting will be held virtually this year on October 16th through at 9:30 a.m. And the city of Bel Aire receives 3 votes, and as such, we need 3 delegates. Are there any council members planning to attend the meeting? I did have a schedule change, and so I will be at the meeting myself. So, any others?
I could.
Certainly welcome to attend. So, I think, Mr. Lasher, you need to get her signed up for that, is that correct?
Yes,
Okay.
several staff are going, or not going, but are participating online. So if there's no council members that are going to attend, then you could appoint, I'm going, Ted's going, Jackie, are you signed up? So, yeah, so,
Okay.
and then Ann, I think, signed up. So we're just gonna be, but watching different speakers. So, if there's no council, you could appoint us, and we could attend that meeting as well. And
So, if you want, you certainly have the option to do that. So just say what you want to do.
So are you really going to,
Yes, I am signed up already. I have been voted as a delegate, but I am signed up to attend the conference. Yes, all 4 days. I don't know what I'll see all 4 days, but I am signed up for all 4 days. Because it is virtual, so, and as these meetings are, they're workshops and things that you go into and other things you don't go to and that kind of thing. So,
I would have been there in the past, but it was before everything was virtual, so you had to show up. Well, in fact, I think I went with you one time when it was here in Wichita, wasn't it? You and I were down there. But yeah, I'll participate. I don't care whether I go in person or.
Yeah, I don't think there's any place to go in person. It's all virtual.
Is it?
Yeah, it's all
Well,
virtual.
I hadn't seen any information on it, so,
Okay.
other than this, which,
Okay.
And what date did you say?
Well, that
Dates.
meeting is the 16th, but it actually is the 4 days there. It's, what will that be, the 15th, 13th, 14th, 15th, and 16th is the entire conference.
Okay.
so if Miss Wynn would like to attend, we could get her signed up, and then so if the mayor and Miss Wynn would like to attend, and can that meeting, I think it's 9 or 9:30.
I think 9:30, and I think it was scheduled for 2 hours.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I think you all would be the best for voting delegates, and
Okay.
if you need anybody else, you can have staff.
Okay, so,
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith.
I can make a motion if we're ready for that. I'll move to appoint Mayor Jim Benage, Councilmember Diane Nguyen, and Ty Lasher as voting delegates, and Ted, Jackie, and Ann as our alternate voting delegates to the 2020 League of Kansas Municipalities Annual Business Meeting.
I'll second.
First and second, any discussion? Hearing none, I'll go call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Chance to make some notes. Item B, special assessments. We had the public meeting just now. a little bit ago, and this action special assesses certain properties for public infrastructure that was installed to service their lot. All property owners were notified in writing, and a public hearing was held earlier in this meeting. Kevin Cowan with Gilmore and Bel Aire is here as well as our finance director, Ted Henry, to answer any questions. We had a good discussion earlier, but you may have more questions, so they're still here for any more questions.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith.
I'll make a motion to approve an ordinance levying special assessments, including benefit fees on certain property to pay the cost of internal improvements in the city of Bel Aire, Kansas, as heretofore authorized by resolution numbers R-1721, R-1722, R-1723, R-1724, R-1725, R-1726, R-1727, and R-1728, and providing for the collection of such special assessments and benefit fees.
I'll second.
First and second, any additional discussion? Hearing none, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll. This is an ordinance.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Jeff Elshoff,
Yes. Aye.
Dr. Joel Schroeder,
Aye.
Mr. Justin Smith,
Aye.
Mr. John Welch,
Aye.
Miss Diane Nguyen.
Aye.
Carries 5-0 with all voting aye. Item C is consideration of executive session. So I'd like to ask for a 15-minute executive session.
Mr. Mayor, I motion to go into executive session for the sole purpose of discussing the subject of consultation with attorney about proposed agreements and related negotiations pursuant to the KSA 75-4319 exception for attorney-client privilege. Invite the city manager and city attorney. The meeting will be for a period of 15 minutes, and the open meeting will resume in the city council chambers at 8:51.
I'll second.
First and second, any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Executive session. Okay, moving on to item D. So selling land and reducing debt has been a priority for this governing body, and we heard from our constituents. We know that there are roughly 180 acres on the south side of the UP railroad track that borders Greenwich and has no utilities at the site. Will most likely take a long time to sell and develop. So the governing body felt an auction might be the best way to remove this debt from the city and give it to an investor. There will be a reserve to ensure fair market value is received. Any discussion on item D?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Welch.
I would like to make a motion to approve the auction agreement with brokers NAI Martins and Reese Nichols for the sale of the specific PBC property leased by the city. Upon sale, city shall release said sold property from the lease agreement with the Bel Aire Public Building Commission.
Second.
First and second, any additional discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Item 6, adjournment.
Mr. Mayor, I motion we adjourn.
Second?
First and second, any discussion? Hearing none, we are, call for a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned. Thank you.